The day we were meant to be married, the man she had always loved confessed his feelings for her in front of everyone. She smiled blissfully, tears streaming down her face as she ran to him. I was left alone on the vast stage. Under the glare of the spotlight, I became the biggest joke in the eyes of our friends and family. Later, she explained that she had traveled through time, enduring countless hardships for him, her one true love. She hoped that if I truly loved her, I would wish her happiness. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. If I wished you happiness, I would be nothing but a fool. On the wedding stage, the MC, dressed in a crisp suit, looked utterly lost. This was likely the most awkward moment in his decade-long career of hosting weddings. He kept darting nervous glances my way, as if pleading for me to rescue him from the unfolding disaster. My attention, however, was glued to Stella. Her hand was pressed against her mouth, her face a mask of joyous tears, but those tears were not for me, nor for the wedding we had spent a year planning. They were for Leo, the man beside her who had just poured out his heart. Below the stage, our guests were stunned into silence. They never expected someone to be so audacious, to declare their love for the bride at her own wedding. I'm so sorry, everyone. Stella suddenly snatched the microphone from the MC's hand. After uttering those words, she grabbed Leo's hand and fled. Stella, what do you think you're doing? Her father, my would-be father-in-law, shot up from his seat, his voice booming with rage. Stella paused at the end of the aisle, looking back at her furious parents, a flicker of hesitation and conflict on her face. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She bit her lip, her voice firm with newfound resolve. I'm pursuing my own happiness. Your happiness? Her mother cried, her eyes red with unshed tears. What about Liam? What is he supposed to do? Stella's gaze flickered to me. She knew I had been watching her the entire time, but she couldn't meet my eyes. Liam, he'll understand, she stammered. He'll wish me well. With that, she pulled Leo off the meticulously decorated aisle, our path to a shared future, and without a backward glance, pushed open the grand doors and disappeared from sight. The hall erupted in a chaotic uproar. Our wedding ceremony was over before it had truly begun, and with it, the final chapter of my 7-year relationship with Stella was written. Stella's parents arrived at our home the next day, their car laden with gifts, their faces etched with apology. My family, incandescent with rage, refused them entry. I didn't see them either. Instead, I locked myself in my room, methodically deleting every photo, every digital trace of the life we had built together. Liam, Stella, and Leo. We had all been students at the same high school. Leo was the president of the art club next door. He was tall, with sharp, handsome features. The sight of him, lost in concentration as he painted, captivated countless girls, earning him the nickname, the Prince of Northwood High. Stella was one of his many admirers. We were desk mates back then. I often saw her furtively scribbling away on pink, patterned stationery, crafting love letters to Leo that she would hide beneath a stack of textbooks. But Leo was always aloof, a distant star who never once replied. After graduation, Leo went abroad to study. By a stroke of luck, Stella and I were accepted into the same university. Our relationship blossomed during those college years, a steady, comforting presence that grew stronger over 7 years of shared dreams and struggles. In all that time, Leo was a ghost. Stella never mentioned his name, and I had long since relegated him to a forgotten footnote in our teenage years. But then, on our wedding day, he reappeared, as charming and dashing as ever. He was an invited guest, meant to give a blessing. I never imagined it would become my deepest curse. I'm at our old spot. Can we meet and talk? A message suddenly lit up my phone screen. I stared at it for a long moment, then grabbed my jacket and bolted out the door. 3 days after the wedding that wasn't, I met Stella at a coffee shop. She wore a pale yellow, floral sundress, her face glowing with a vitality that stood in stark contrast to my own haggard appearance. I'm sorry, she said as soon as she sat down. For what? I asked, my voice flat. I loved you once, so I can't lie to you. The words were a physical blow. The phrase, loved you once, felt like a shard of glass in my heart. I can travel through time. I can go back to the past. Her statement was so absurd it ignited a fire of rage within me. So you loved me, and now you don't, and you're using this ridiculous excuse to get rid of me? Stella, what do you take me for? Wasn't humiliating me once enough? Do you need to see me make a fool of myself again? No. She shook her head, her expression unervingly calm. It's because I traveled back that I finally understood. The person I truly love has always been Leo. Leo. His name was a second shard of glass twisting in the wound. Haha. Good thing we didn't actually get married, I sneered. This way it's just cheating. The world is full of cheaters. One more doesn't make a difference. If you had done this after we were married, that would be adultery. That's a serious crime. My crude words made her flinch. Liam, I know you're angry, but I went through so much for Leo after I went back in time. If you really love me, just wish me happiness, okay? Her words were the final blow. My heart, already fractured, shattered into dust. So what if you can time travel? The person you hurt is the one who stood by you since we were kids, who loved you for 7 years, who gave you his whole heart. I let out a long sigh, the fight draining out of me. The litany of cruel insults I had prepared suddenly seemed pointless. All I wanted was to leave, to get away from this woman who had become a complete stranger. My relationship with Stella was over. No matter how humiliating the wedding had been, life had to go on. Gradually, my family, her family, and even the guests from that day began to return to their normal lives. Then, suddenly, my parents' company ran into trouble. Since I was a child, my parents had run a small stationery shop. It grew as I did, eventually becoming a trading company with 50 employees, specializing in the procurement of school supplies. Many of the city's schools and convenience stores were our clients. But a few weeks ago, several school principals we had good relationships with were abruptly transferred. My father was placed under investigation, and our supply channels were severely compromised. Worse, the raw materials for our best-selling educational aids became impossible to order, with delivery dates pushed back indefinitely. Our reputation, built over decades, was crumbling. The stress took its toll. My mother, who had worked day and night to salvage the business, collapsed from exhaustion and was hospitalized. She and my father were nearly 60. The accountant over at Mr. Peterson's factory told me they landed a massive foreign trade deal last month. I told my mother as I handed her a cup of hot water in her hospital bed. A German company. The price was too good to refuse, and they signed a 5-year contract. Now their entire production line is dedicated to the foreign order. Mr. Peterson said his hands were tied. It was a board decision. After all these years as partners, they could just do that to us. My mother murmured, her voice weak. But I understood. In business, the bottom line always comes first. Mr. Peterson said that for old time's sake, he'll try to get us some compensation for the disruption. The real problem is Principal Davis and the others being transferred. That hit us the hardest, my mother said, her brow furrowed with worry. We have a warehouse full of teaching materials we can't sell, and with your father implicated in this investigation, that's the real crisis. Why were they transferred? I asked, confused. Principal Davis isn't even 50. He's years away from retirement. Why so suddenly? Officer Miller said someone reported them. My mother took a sip of water, her words trailing off. I understood what she couldn't bring herself to say. She suspected Stella. Stella's name had become taboo in our house. My parents avoided it, trying to protect my feelings. But we were so close to getting married. She knew the ins and outs of our family business. She was the only one who could have leaked such sensitive information. Seeing the new white strands in my mother's hair, a wave of sorrow washed over me. She was worried her son couldn't handle a second devastating blow. After comforting my mother, I went home and started digging. Principal Davis had been transferred, but the new principal would still need to procure supplies. Through my contacts, I got my hands on the new materials. The manufacturer was a local company. While researching this new company, a name appeared on the corporate filing that sent a chill down my spine. The legal representative was Leo. I suddenly remembered the German enterprise that had squeezed my family's company out of the market. I remembered that Leo had studied in Germany. Could it really be such a coincidence? I used what was left of my parents' connections and reached out to Mr. Peterson again. He gave me some information on the German company. Leo's name wasn't on it, but the corporate representative was listed as a man named Cavendish. And under this Cavendish's name was an entertainment investment firm based in Japan. That firm was the largest shareholder in Leo's company. Could it really be Stella? To help Leo, had she so ruthlessly betrayed my parents? My heart twisted in agony. I sent Stella a text message. I had sworn I would never contact her again, but I had to know. Was it her? Was it the woman who had slept so sweetly in my arms, who had cried with joy at our engagement, who had promised to love me forever? Was she the one who had not only betrayed me, but destroyed my family? Shamefully, the truth arrived in 10 seconds. Stella's asleep. Don't blame her. She did it for me. Thanks for everything these past few years. Don't contact her again. I kept this to myself. I didn't tell a soul, nor did I allow myself to spiral into despair. I tossed the phone under my bed, burying that message in the deepest part of my heart, sealing it away like a demon under a mountain. I returned to my routine, bringing meals to my mother at the hospital and sorting through what was left of the company in my spare time. With my father under investigation and our main supplier gone, the business was in shambles. I made the difficult decision to lay off most of the staff and cut all ties related to Principal Davis and his network. The severance packages were costly, and our family's income plummeted. With my mother's mounting hospital bills, the weight on my shoulders felt immense. But I didn't regret my choice. I knew that in the early days, my father had used some questionable, gray area tactics to earn his first big profits. Though the company was now in ruins, I saw it as a chance to be reborn, to build something clean from the ground up. I sent the few remaining employees to different school districts across the city, making each responsible for a small area. We started from scratch, supplying the smallest stationery shops, corner stores, and convenience marts. I gave them a large share of the profits. The income was a pittance compared to before, but these were the loyal employees who had been with my father through thick and thin. Seeing our family's plight, they refused to abandon us. My next step was to find a new primary supplier. Through Mr. Peterson's introduction, I prepared to travel to another province to negotiate a new deal. Before I left, however, I ran into someone at the train station. Chloe and I had grown up together in the same old courtyard complex. Until I was 7, I lived with my grandparents in a neighborhood of red brick, single-story houses. In the center of the courtyard was an old dry well. Chloe lived across from me, and we went to the same kindergarten. Every day after school, we'd play games with pebbles, not for any prize, but for the simple satisfaction of being better than the other. Later, my parents opened their stationery store, and I moved away. But my connection with Chloe didn't end there. From elementary to high school, we were always at the same school. We were in different classes, but we remained close friends. After what happened with Stella, everyone walked on eggshells around me. Chloe, however, was the first to text. "Heard you got dumped, ha." I was so furious I blocked her immediately. But during my mother's hospitalization, when I was stretched to my breaking point, she was the one who showed up to help care for her, shouldering much of my burden. And now, she had followed me to the train station. "What are you doing here?" I asked, frowning. "Where's my mom?" "I asked my mom to come over. She'll look after Annie for a while," Chloe replied with a cheerful grin. "Auntie was worried about you, so she told me to keep a close eye on you." I mumbled under my breath. "Am I that fragile?" "Yes," she said, and without another word, she swiped her ticket and went through the gate. I sighed, shook my head, and followed her. For the first time in a long time, luck was on my side. The negotiations with the new supplier went incredibly smoothly. The price was a little higher, and there were added shipping costs. But having a stable source of raw materials was everything. Once we established a solid supply chain through a few successful collaborations, we could start thinking about expansion. After a whirlwind of meetings, Chloe and I took an overnight train back. Exhausted and disheveled, we went straight to the hospital to see my mother. At the entrance, we ran into a radiant-looking Leo and Stella. They were a picture-perfect couple, impeccably dressed. Trailing behind them were Stella's equally well-dressed parents. They saw us, of course, and I imagine we didn't look our best. The series of crises at home had left me looking gaunt, and after a few days on the road, I had the beginnings of a scruffy beard. Chloe was no better. She had followed me in such a rush that she hadn't even packed her usual skincare products. We had been washing with cheap hotel soap, and her face looked dull and tired. She looked worse off than the janitor mopping the floor nearby. The atmosphere crackled with awkward tension. Leo was the first to break the silence. He wrapped an arm around Stella, a gesture that was half affection, half showboating. "I was bringing Stella for a prenatal checkup. I had no idea your mother was staying here. What a coincidence." Stella said nothing, simply nestling against him with a look of pure contentment. I didn't even want to look at them. I tried to walk past. "Liam, this is a little something from me. Please give it to your mother," Stella's father called out, holding a thick envelope. I didn't take it. My eyes were drawn to the Rolex on his right wrist, glinting in the afternoon sun. My gaze then shifted to the jade bracelet on his wife's wrist, its deep green luster a clear sign of its expense. Seeing my lack of response, Stella stepped forward. "I know things are difficult for your family right now. This is just a small gesture." I managed a faint smile. "Difficult?" My family wasn't having any difficulties until recently. Stella's face fell. Leo immediately rushed to her side, pulling her into a protective embrace while snatching the envelope with his other hand. Fine. If you don't want it, don't take it. Stella was just trying to be kind. You're so ungrateful. There, Stella, don't be upset. You need to stay happy for the baby. Her mother cooed before her face hardened into a vicious glare directed at me. It's a good thing Stella had the sense not to end up with you. Look at you now. Imagine the hardship she would have endured if she had stayed with you. Stella's father chimed in. Liam, I'm not trying to criticize you, but a man needs to have some ambition. You'll never accomplish anything with such a petty mindset. Their words washed away all the optimism I had felt from my successful trip. I couldn't be bothered to argue with them. Their sanctimonious expressions were nauseating, and I had more important things to do. Just as I turned to leave, a small hand gripped mine. I looked over and saw Chloe looking at the four of them with a mischievous glint in her eyes. So you're Leo, she said, her voice deceptively sweet. The one who stole Liam's woman. I didn't steal anyone, Leo replied, puffing out his chest. Stella and I have been in love for a very long time. Is that so? Chloe pursed her lips. You must have been very poor when you were a child, right? Poor? Stella's mother shrieked. My Leo studied in Germany during university. He's handsome and educated, 100 times better than this loser. Right. Chloe nodded enthusiastically. Then you must have some kind of psychological disorder. This is a hospital. You should make an appointment to see a doctor. Leo frowned. What are you talking about? I don't have any psychological problems. You don't. Chloe stared directly at him, a devilish smirk spreading across her weary face. I knew that smirk. It meant someone was about to have a very bad day. If you're rich and you're not sick, she said, her voice dripping with scorn, then why do you like collecting other people's trash? Leo's face turned a deep shade of crimson. Stella went deathly pale, swaying on her feet. You bitch. Who are you calling trash? Leo lunged at Chloe, his fist raised. I moved instantly, stepping in front of her. His punch connected squarely with my jaw, but I didn't hesitate, driving my foot hard into his chest. I had been wanting to do that for a long time. 2 against 4. We're amazing. Chloe crowed in the hospital room, proudly recounting our victory to my mother. What use were you? I did all the fighting. I grumbled, a fresh bandage wrapped around my shoulder. I thought you took karate. Turns out you've just got a sharp tongue. You were a complete liability. Her words had been like a nuclear bomb to Leo's ego. No man could stand that. Even Stella's parents had joined the fray, and all 4 of them had come at me. I hadn't backed down. All the anger and frustration from the past few months had erupted, and I had fought them right there in the busy hospital lobby. It took a team of security guards to pull us apart. We were all a little banged up, except for Chloe and Stella. Chloe, with her zero combat skills, had stood on the sidelines cheering me on. Stella, being pregnant, had been whisked away from the chaos at the first sign of trouble. I may not have fought, but I gave you my full moral support, Chloe said, looking quite pleased with herself. And I bet you anything that adulterous pair won't sleep well tonight. His wife slept with her ex for 7 years. That's got to sting. I chuckled. You call that moral support? You were instigating. The second you opened your mouth, they fought even harder. My mother wasn't amused. Her eyes were red with worry as she looked at my dusty clothes and bruised, bloodied face. I quickly reassured her, telling her about the successful deal I had secured. That seemed to lift her spirits a little. She advised me not to be too hasty, to focus on getting back on our feet one step at a time and wait for my father to be released. Her thoughts mirrored my own. With my father gone, I had no access to his network of contacts. I was fighting this battle alone. Although I had managed to stabilize what was left of the company, I had no real business experience. The income from the small convenience stores was barely enough to keep us afloat. Following my mother's advice, I focused on stabilizing the new supply and distribution channels. With Chloe around, I didn't have to worry about things at the hospital. Days turned into weeks. I hustled, traveling all over the city, persuading a few more shops to carry our products. It was grueling work, but the company was still running, and my mother was finally discharged from the hospital. Things were slowly, painstakingly, getting better. Then Officer Miller called with devastating news. My father's case had been escalated to the provincial level. He was likely facing prison time. Based on similar cases, although my father was involved in a non-compliant business practices case, it shouldn't have been this severe. A sincere confession and a hefty fine should have been enough. Officer Miller explained that the main problem was Principal Davis. Before all this, my father's relationship with him was professional. Their only real connection was the supply of teaching materials. But now, Davis was being investigated. Not only for corruption within the school, but also for collusion with high-level officials outside the education system. With so many people involved, the city police had no choice but to hand the case over to a provincial task force. And in the midst of this larger investigation, Principal Davis had started to throw my father under the bus, pinning numerous unrelated crimes on him. It's a classic move. Protect yourself, sacrifice the pawn, Officer Miller explained grimly. Basically, he's found a scapegoat to take the fall so others can walk free. The news made my mother look 10 years older. Isn't there anything we can do? She pleaded, her voice trembling. They're going to destroy him. Unless we can find evidence to prove his innocence or get Davis to retract his statement, the outlook is not good, the officer said, shaking his head. I had no choice but to try and work through Davis's connections, to find someone, anyone, who could get me a meeting with him. But after more than 2 weeks of trying, I hit a wall. Every door was closed. Time was running out, and my father could be sentenced at any moment. That's when Stella contacted me, saying she had a way to get my father out. In the corner of that same coffee shop, Chloe and I met with Stella and Leo again. I wasn't completely ignorant of their situation over the past 6 months. Leo had used the supply chains my family had built to rapidly expand his empire. He had secured contracts not just with Davis's school, but with numerous others, and with his deep pockets, he had even branched out into municipal construction projects. The gap between us was the difference between heaven and hell. This time, however, Stella didn't look as radiant as I expected. She was pregnant, and though she was draped in expensive clothes and glittering jewelry, an undeniable sadness clouded her features. Leo, too, had lost his confident swagger. A manic, almost desperate fire burned in his eyes. A sense of unease settled in my stomach, but for my father's sake, I forced myself to ask about their solution. I can make Principal Davis change his testimony, Leo said bluntly. So you were the ones who made him frame my father in the first place? I shot back. Leo laughed, a sound devoid of humor. We didn't have to, but we could. You believe that, don't you? I've never believed a word you've said, I answered without hesitation. Liam, you should trust me, Stella suddenly interjected. She looked me straight in the eye, her expression a confusing mix of emotions. You know I can do it. A chill ran down my spine, as if I'd been plunged into icy water. Her time travel. In that instant, everything clicked into place. Why Leo's business was booming, why Principal Davis had suddenly turned on my father, why I couldn't get in touch with anyone connected to the case. It was all because Stella could travel through time. I didn't know the limits of her ability, but if she could change the past to influence the present, she could orchestrate events before they even happened. She could manipulate reality itself. My gaze drifted to her swollen belly. I remembered my father, so excited to be a grandfather, forcing himself to quit smoking under my mother's watchful eye. I'm quitting now, he had joked. So you two can't complain later that we're spoiling the grandkids. And now, for the sake of her long-lost love, she was willing to send that same man, a man in his 60s, to prison. Was this love, or was it a twisted obsession? Leo followed my gaze, and his face contorted with rage. He slammed his hand on the table, a malicious grin spreading across his face. Let me have your girlfriend for one night, and I'll let your dad go. What did you say? I was stunned. I couldn't believe the words that had just come out of his mouth. And as he said them, Stella just sat there, her eyes welling with tears, but she said nothing. She did nothing. Were these people even human? They were animals. No, worse than animals. Chloe laughed again. So let me get this straight. Your woman was slept with by another man. So now you want to sleep with his woman to get even? Is that it? So what if it is? If you say no, I'll let his father rot in prison. This time, Chloe laughed out loud. She took a sip of her coffee and shook her head. First of all, you're not wrong about one thing. I do love Liam. I have since we were kids, and that has never changed. As she spoke, I quietly took her hand in mine. The turmoil of the past few months had shown me the truth of human nature. It had shown me who was worth loving, and who deserved nothing but contempt. But, Chloe continued, a rare blush coloring her cheeks, though her eyes remained sharp as daggers. You're wrong about something else. You think I'm like this pathetic woman here, desperate to kiss the ground a man walks on? Besides, I have absolutely no interest in men who like to pick through other people's trash. It's just so dirty. A genuine smile touched my lips. That girl's tongue was as sharp as ever. Leo's face was now a furious purple. Even Stella flinched, and I saw her knuckles turn white as she clenched her fists. Then I'll make sure his father dies in there. Leo snarled. It was my turn to speak. A self-proclaimed elite, returned from overseas, and a so-called devoted lover. A perfect match made in filth. But this will be our last conversation. You can keep using your disgusting tactics against me. I'll take whatever you throw at me. But if you think you can make me bow down, you're dead wrong. I stood up, my eyes fixed on Stella. You know me, and you know I know you. If you dare to touch my family, I will make you regret it. With that, I pulled Chloe to her feet, and we walked away. Behind me, I heard the sound of shattering glass, followed by Leo's hoarse, enraged screams and Stella's shrill cry. Stella's power was undeniable. With her ability to manipulate time and Leo's resources, they were unstoppable. We were powerless. Even our former business partners began to pull their investments. The few loyal employees I had left told me that Leo was systematically taking over our market share. He had the capital and the channels. Clients were flocking to him. To make matters worse, the company's income dwindled to nothing, and the remaining employees had to be let go, which meant another round of severance pay. We couldn't afford. The company was on the verge of collapse. My mother grew more frail by the day. I was consumed by anxiety, but I refused to give up. There was no future for us in this city. I began to look for opportunities in other provinces. Perhaps it was a twist of fate, or perhaps it was a blind spot Stella had overlooked. But the new supplier Mr. Peterson had introduced me to was a lifeline I had carefully maintained. Our orders were small, but our relationship was built on transparency and trust. I went to the owner, Mr. Chun, and laid my family's situation bare. He was a man of considerable resources with business interests all over the country. He admired my integrity and proposed an idea. I should give up on my business in our hometown and follow him to another province to start over. It was exactly what I needed to hear. If I stayed and tried to compete in the same industry, Stella and Leo would never leave me alone. I didn't have superpowers or a family fortune to fall back on. I couldn't win. My only chance was to leave, to build something new in a place where they couldn't reach me. But it meant abandoning everything and starting from zero in a strange city. It was a massive gamble, with my entire future as the stakes. If I won, I would return one day to reclaim what was mine. If I lost, I would live forever in their shadow. In my darkest hour, my mother was my rock. She told me that if my father were here, he would support my decision. I was their son, and no matter what I chose, they would always believe in me. I immediately dissolved the company, paid off the remaining staff, and used what little we had left to pay a portion of my father's fines, hoping to reduce his sentence. Then, with only a small amount of cash, I took my mother and Chloe and left my home behind. On the crowded bus, my mother fell into an exhausted sleep. Chloe rested her head on my shoulder, watching the twilight gather outside the window. Are your parents going to be okay with you running off with a guy who has no future? I asked her quietly. Chloe smiled. I wasn't lying. I've been in love with you since the day you first beat me at that game of pebbles. My parents are the only ones who know. They trust my judgment. And I've always had excellent taste. A warmth spread through my chest. I pulled her closer, holding her tight, and whispered Stella's secret to her. So, she goes back in time just to make someone who doesn't like her fall in love with her. Chloe scoffed. Her taste is definitely not as good as mine. I smiled and kissed her gently. For the first 20-odd years of my life, I had been sheltered by my parents. Life had been easy, carefree. Now, reality had hit me with the force of a tidal wave. The future of my family rested on my shoulders. Sometimes, a person grows up in a single moment. Life in a new city was far harder than I had imagined. Mr. Chun was supportive, but he didn't coddle me. He gave me a small, decently located stationery shop to manage, and that was it. After years of corporate dealings, I was back where my parents had started. My mother was too old for the rigors of running a shop, so she managed our small household, while Chloe and I poured everything we had into the business. Chloe usually ran the store while I used introductions from suppliers and other local merchants to slowly build a network. At first, we barely made enough to cover our expenses and rent, but I started using our shop as a base to build relationships with teachers at nearby schools. With their help, I managed to get our stationery, textbooks, and other educational materials into their classrooms. During that time, my mother's health took a turn for the worse, a result of years of accumulated stress and hard work. For weeks, Chloe and I juggled the shop, and took turns staying with her at the hospital, day and night. We were so exhausted that one of the nurses took pity on us and arranged for a cleaner to help watch over my mother during the day, giving us a few precious hours of rest. Somehow, through sheer grit, we made it through that first year. On New Year's Eve, the three of us celebrated in our tiny, 30-square-meter apartment. We had a simple hot pot with a few vegetables and some meat, and a bottle of red wine Mr. Chun had given us. It was a humble meal, but it was filled with warmth. Tipsy from the wine, Chloe asked me when I was going to marry her, joking that I was probably still thinking about that bitch Stella. I just smiled and secretly tightened my grip on the ring box in my pocket. It was her New Year's gift, bought with the bonus Mr. Chun had given me. I didn't take it out. The time wasn't right yet. The new year brought new luck. While making New Year's calls, I met Principal Sullivan. The educational materials at his school were outdated and overpriced, and he was looking for a new partner. Having grown up attending meetings with my father, I knew that for school administrators, securing better resources was often a stepping stone to career advancement. I sensed an opportunity. I immediately pitched myself, explaining that I had the resources and experience to meet his needs. He was open to the idea. However, standardized school materials were a different beast from the private sector. Products I was used to. It required a significant investment in manpower and capital to create a complete supply chain. It was far beyond my current means. I had no choice but to bring the opportunity to Mr. Chun. He, of course, saw the potential and agreed to invest. He would fund the new company, and I would run it. The catch? He would take 70% of the profits. It was an exploitative deal. I would be taking all the risks of running the business, while he reaped most of the rewards. But it was a chance I couldn't pass up. I signed the agreement. Chloe hired someone to manage the stationery shop, and the two of us dedicated ourselves completely to the new venture. From choosing an office space to decorating, registering the company, hiring staff, and writing company policies, we did everything ourselves. Once the company was established, my life became a blur of meetings, building supply channels, controlling costs, and securing orders. Chloe, in the prime of her youth, stood by me through it all without a single complaint. She was my constant source of optimism, my biggest cheerleader. She cared for my mother and never stopped teasing me about when I was going to propose. For years flew by. The company I started with Mr. Chun had become the largest educational and entertainment supplier in the region, with over 80% of the local schools as our clients. We moved from our tiny apartment into a 3-story villa, and I hired a full-time caregiver for my mother, who was now approaching 70. I wanted Chloe to quit and enjoy the life we had built, but she just rolled her eyes. You haven't married me yet, so what kind of lady of the house would I be? Oh, I see. Now that you're rich, you're going to dump me and go crawling back to that bitch Stella. Is that it? Stella. I knew Chloe would tease me about her for the rest of my life. Mr. Chun, having achieved financial freedom, transferred his shares in the group to me, making me the majority shareholder. He retained the rights to his dividends and prepared to move his family overseas. On the day of his departure, Chloe and I saw them off at the airport. His wife whisked Chloe away to the duty-free shops, leaving Mr. Chun and me to talk. 5 years ago, I said, I came to you with my family and $200 in my pocket. And 5 years later, he replied with a nostalgic smile, this is the biggest airport in the province, and you're a billionaire. I handed him a finely carved jade bracelet as a token of my gratitude. Business is war, he said, accepting the gift. And you, Liam, are the single best investment I've ever made. He then asked what my plans were after my father was released. My answer was firm. I'm going back. I'm going to take back what I lost. He nodded, knowing my stubborn nature. He handed me a folder. It contained a detailed report on Stella and Leo. I took it with a word of thanks. Mr. Chun said he wouldn't be coming back after moving abroad. He wanted a peaceful life. He trusted me with the company. He glanced over at Chloe, who was laughing with his wife. I won't be able to make it to your wedding, he said. But if it's not with her, I'll definitely fly back to crash it. I gave a wry smile. Chloe had a way of making everyone adore her. Luck favors those who look forward, Liam, he said as his final piece of advice. Only cowards keep looking back. Make sure you know what you're doing. As the new year began, my father's prison sentence was finally coming to an end. I traveled back to my hometown with my mother and Chloe. Following a tip from Mr. Chin's report, I found Stella at a small corner store. When I saw her, I almost didn't recognize her. Was this the same vibrant, dazzling woman from the wedding? She was wearing a bulky, oversized jacket, her hair tied back carelessly with a string, strands of gray visible throughout. She was barely in her 30s, but she looked as if she had lived a lifetime of hardship. She was squatting in front of a cluttered shelf, rummaging through a cardboard box. When she saw me, she froze, and the items in her hands tumbled to the floor. "What happened to you?" I asked, unable to hide my shock. "Leo, he left me." The words had barely left her lips before tears began to stream down her face. Then, in broken sobs, she told me everything that had happened over the past 5 years. After I had left town, Leo, with Stella's help, had seen his business empire flourish. But Chloe's words had planted a seed of doubt in his mind, a seed that grew into a thorny bush of paranoia and rage. When Stella gave birth to their child, Leo, against everyone's advice, insisted on a paternity test. The test proved he was the father, but the act itself created a permanent rift between them. He started staying out all night, openly taking lovers. When Stella confronted him, he cruelly told her that it was his right. Stella was in agony. She tried to fix things the only way she knew how, by going back in time, trying to mend the past just as she had done to win Leo's heart. But she discovered that life was not so easily controlled. No matter what she changed, the future would always diverge in unexpected ways. Leo would leave her for different reasons: a business failure, a family tragedy, a sudden change of heart. They were like two lines destined to intersect briefly before heading in opposite directions forever. I can't live without him. I love him. So I had to keep going back. Stella's voice grew frantic. But I lost my daughter," she shrieked. "I can't tell what's real anymore. The past, the future. To get him back, I killed my own child." I watched the truck hit her, and a part of me was thinking, will this change the past? Will this bring Leo back to me? Suddenly, she flew into a rage, kicking over the shelves, sending products crashing to the floor. Amid the wreckage, she collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm a monster. I don't deserve to be a mother. I'm a worthless, shameless bitch. I deserve this." I watched my own daughter die. Looking at her ravaged, pale face, I felt a wave of pity. Stella was broken. The unobtainable love of her youth had become a demon that had consumed her, twisting her love for Leo into a grotesque obsession. "But Liam, you left? Why did you come back?" She mumbled, her body trembling as she sat slumped on the floor, her eyes bloodshot and wild. "You got better. You always get better." Suddenly, her head snapped up, and she screamed, "You came here to laugh at me. That's it, isn't it? If it weren't for you, I wouldn't. Be trash. It's your fault. Leo wouldn't have left me. He loves me. He's loved me for so many years. I know he has. He loves me." With her hair flying around her like a madwoman, she lunged at me. At the same instant, the automatic doors behind me slid open, and a shadowy figure rushed toward me, a knife raised high. Bang! A single gunshot echoed through the small store. The figure behind me collapsed in a pool of blood. Stella froze, her face a mask of shock and horror. She shoved me aside and threw herself onto the body, her wails echoing off the walls. "No, no, no. Leo, don't. Don't leave me. Leo." The man on the floor was Leo. The bullet had entered the back of his head, and dark red blood was pulsing onto the cheap linoleum. He looked nothing like the successful tycoon I remembered. Though tall, he was emaciated, like a drug addict whose body had been hollowed out. His eyes were sunken and dark, his cheeks gaunt. Even in death, his face was contorted in a mask of pure hatred directed at me. I looked down at him, my heart as cold and still as ice. They were no longer the people I once knew, but they had made the fatal mistake of thinking I was still the same weak, easily broken Liam they had once destroyed. Mr. Chin's report had laid their lives bare. After their daughter's death in a car accident, Leo had used it as an excuse to kick Stella out. Her parents, unable to cope with the series of tragedies, had both passed away soon after. Leo, who had believed his success was due to his own genius, quickly found that without. Stella's temporal meddling, his arrogance and incompetence led his business to ruin. He fell into gambling and drugs. In just 1 year, the celebrated young entrepreneur had become a pariah, a rat scurrying in the city's gutters. To fund his addictions, he had turned to crime, eventually becoming a drug trafficker. When I learned of this, I contacted the now retired Officer Miller. Together, we had devised a plan to lure him out. In a way, I was giving Stella one last chance. If she hadn't contacted Leo, I might have let her be, left her to live out the rest of her miserable life. But she had texted him without a moment's hesitation, still hoping she could trade my life for Leo's affection. She was beyond saving. Just then, Officer Miller, Chloe, and several other officers who had been waiting outside rushed in. Chloe ran into my arms, holding me tight, only relaxing when she saw I was unharmed. She looked over at Stella, who was cradling Leo's body, her eyes vacant and unseeing. Chloe's lips parted as if to say something, but for once, the sharp-tongued woman was silent. We watched as Officer Miller and his team secured the scene and led a catatonic Stella to a police car. As the wail of the siren faded into the distance, the deepest, darkest obsession in my heart began to fade with it. For years, in countless drunken nights and feverish dreams, I had fantasized about my revenge. I had crafted a detailed plan: take over their market, cut off their supply lines, gather evidence of their crimes, and dismantle their empire piece by piece. I imagined them crawling to my door, begging on their knees, their foreheads bloody from kowtowing as they pleaded for my forgiveness. And in my fantasy, I would coldly refuse. I would mock them, humiliate them, and attack their fragile psyches with the cruelest words I could conjure, ensuring they would spend the rest of their lives in torment. Those fantasies were the fuel that had kept me going through the hardest years. But reality had written a different ending. Time is the ultimate revenge. It brings a quiet clarity to all things, revealing beauty and burying darkness. The most powerful counterattack is not vengeance, but simply moving forward. The bullets you fire in your youth will one day find their way back to you. Finally, I was able to see Stella one last time in the detention center's infirmary. Under a doctor's care, she had regained some lucidity. She asked me a question. "Liam, I had a superpower. How did I end up like this, while you, who had nothing, just kept getting more and more successful?" I was silent for a moment before giving her the answer I had spent a long time considering. Every time you failed, you try to go back, to fix things, to find some perfect path that doesn't exist. You were trapped in the past, but I don't have that ability. All I have is the present and the future. I can only look forward, take responsibility for my choices, and live with a clear conscience. "You wanted a past without regrets," I continued, "but I was always looking toward the future. And you forgot something important, Stella. Our youth is supposed to be full of regrets. Those imperfections are what make our memories precious." Tears streamed down her face. I stood up and walked away, and I didn't look back. Outside the gates of the prison, my father, looking older but standing tall, was waiting for me with my mother and Chloe. My mom asked what I planned to do next, if I wanted to take some time to rest. I shook my head. I looked at Chloe's radiant smile, and then at my parents' silver hair, and I declared loudly for all of them to hear. The most important duty is to continue the family line. So, what's next is simple. I'm going to start a family, have children, and give you both the grandchildren you've been waiting for. Behind us, the sun was rising, casting a brilliant, colorful glow across the sky, painting the clouds in shades of hope and promise. The end.